started my day with noise that could only be described as a woodpecker slamming its head against the metal that is on the top of my chimney, like the chimney cap.
I have dealt with that exact problem, except it was crows.
Yeah, except in this case, it was exactly I'm like, that sounds like a woodpecker bashing its head. And I go outside and look, I'm like, it is a woodpecker bashing its head against the tin or whatever, the stainless steel.
We had to replace the siding. Well, it's not siding. The corner of the house had like wood that went down the side of it. It's not, it was wood, but we had to replace that entire thing from a woodpecker one summer. Came and decided he was going to eat every insect that was in there and wasn't leaving until they were all gone, you know? So enjoy your summer. Well, maybe those bugs will come out of the ground finally. And
oh God, no! It's starting.
Is
we
it?
don't have. Yeah, the infestation has slowly begun. It's going to ramp up here because it's supposed to be pretty spicy outside, like in the 80s.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be.
And high 80s. So that's 28 communist, 29.
I love that you try to change this into some other temperature.
I can't do the Kelvin conversion.
That's, no, does anyone use Kelvin? What's
scientist?
Well, no, I know that. I mean, like it's pretty much Celsius, and then the three countries that use Fahrenheit, isn't it?
Yeah. Yep. Yesterday, so Microsoft put out a really interesting blog post where they said 21H ones are now available. That's it. That's it. And then if you kept reading, they said, "Oh yeah, we're not shipping 10X." And I'll just take my little victory lap and say,
you know, I don't want to go off on a rant, and I'm gonna really try. I'm gonna try to rein this in, but I feel like Microsoft has jumped the shark when it comes to clarity and honesty. And this is a problem because I feel that Microsoft as a whole is a company that can and should be trusted by customers, right? I trust them with my passwords. I trust them with my family photos. I trust them with my personal information. And I say that like not I blindly trust. Like I literally think about it and I do trust them. I trust them more than I trust Apple. I trust, which, you know, from a privacy perspective maybe is short-sighted on my part. I trust them more than Google, certainly. I trust them a lot more than Amazon.
How about Facebook?
Facebook is not even in this conversation. If I could kick that thing to the curb and never stop kicking it, I would. But this kind of thing is deliberately unclear and is thus dishonest. And as somebody in the comments, and by the way, I so rarely have a chance to feel good about the comments, but as someone in the comments pointed out, and I agree, this is an excellent example of the opposite of this, was when Google canceled remember they were going to come up with a wireless charger, was it called AirPad or something that had, it was going to do like the phone, you could put like multiple things on it anywhere. You know, after, a year, 9 months, whatever it was, went by, they finally came out and said, look, we're not going to be able to do this. Sorry. And they literally said, we had really, the product that we've developed does not meet our high expectations. We're not going to sell it to the public. We apologize. It's like, yes. And there's a company, I got to say, honestly, I find Apple to be somewhat pompous. I don't usually look to them as a good example of they make high quality hardware, obviously. But I mean, as far as their PR communications, not something I would usually hold up as an example of how to do it, or an example of honesty. Let's put it that way. They have great advertising, obviously. But there it is. That's how you do it, And the thing that, one of the other things that bothers me about it, because actually it's the honesty thing that really bothers me, is you and I know, just in talking about this and understanding how the world works and with Microsoft and Windows and everything, this is actually an example of something that Microsoft should be publicizing, which is good decision making. I think we have fans of Surface. We have fans of Windows. The same guy runs both. There have been dubious decisions made over the years. We've talked a lot about Thunderbolt and USB-C and blah, 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 whatever. Here's this guy who you could either hold up on a pedestal or vilify depending on your perspective. This is an example of something that they should be touting as leadership. This guy evaluated this and said, no, this doesn't meet our needs. It doesn't meet our customers' needs. It doesn't work. It's technically unfeasible. This is dumb. It's a waste of money. We're not doing it. That's how this should have been communicated. It should have been a letter from Panos Panay saying we are not doing this, and this is the right thing for Windows and for our customers. And I just did it off the cuff. That's how easy it is. It's not hard to be honest, folks. You know, right?
I tend to agree. We could have taken this one with, Microsoft, like many companies, has screwed up along the way. Apple has their Hi-Fi that just completely flopped. They have Ping, which was a social network that completely flopped. Google has a graveyard in their backyard of things. And it's like, just come out and own it. It's going to be better off than saying like, we're going to massage this. And
I'm probably not going to write this because this would be perceived as Apple hate, but I'll just flip the Apple thing back on its head, because in case anyone thought I was going off into la la land for a second, I've conceived in my head this article called Only Apple, right? And it would just be a series of paragraphs that started with the words only Apple. And here are a couple of samples. Only Apple would release an expensive audiophile quality headset 6 months before announcing lossless audio formats that headset does not support.
Mm-hmm.
Only Apple would release 2 generations of audiophile home speaker systems, the second of which came out just months before releasing a lossless audio format that those speakers do not support. Only Apple would release the first Apple Silicon-based Macs and then replace all of them less than a year later with colorful new beautiful versions when they could have just waited until then to release them. Why would you release a thing that looks like the last thing when you're going to come up with a beautiful, colorful MacBook Air 9 months later? Why? You could go on and on.
Yeah.
You know, Apple gets a lot right. Nothing is black and white. Everything is gray. I mean, but I look at, if you were an Apple fan and you're so excited about the M1 and you're like, oh my God, here we go. You buy one of these things, and it's great, right? It's probably fine. If you're a Mac guy or an Apple guy, you love this stuff. It's fine. But then you start seeing these renders of MacBook Airs, and you're like, like, why would they do that?
Well,
when
I can
the
explain.
M2 comes out, wouldn't you release the new stuff? Like,
yeah, I can explain here, Paul. Real simple. You don't become a $1 trillion company by selling $500 headphones to somebody once. You got to sell them 2 pairs. And they knew, Paul, and you just would.
I'm all blurry.
Yeah. And for a fact that the people that bought those M1 MacBook Airs, the first generation stuff, were the hardcore enthusiasts. And that as soon as they come out in colored one, that same group of people will be out there buying it. And Apple just sold you 2 laptops and you only needed one.
You're right, but I just want to asterisk it a little bit because, the MacBook Air in particular is their most mainstream laptop of all. That product is just sold to normal people too, right? Mm-hmm. So, and the MacBook Pro they put out on M1 is just the base model, which they shouldn't even have. I don't even know why they have that product, but whatever. I really feel like this impacts normal people too, right? Because the thing you're describing is correct. Like, you're an enthusiast. You're like, well, I'm going to go with the MacBook Air because it's the cheap one. But what I really have my eye on is an M2 based MacBook Pro with multiple, legacy ports, blah, blah, whatever's happening. Then I will take this M1 based MacBook Air and I will give it to my wife, my kid, my brother, whatever. And yeah, there's no doubt that happens. But I think about all the normal people, because a MacBook Air is not in the context of the PC industry particularly expensive. Like, we tend to think of products as being very expensive. And in many ways, that's out of date. I mean, the headphones are absolutely that way, but a lot of their products are actually competitive, I would say, these days, or can be. And I would feel bad for an average consumer. Like, if my wife she's not, but if she was into Macs and stuff and needed a new Mac, and she's like, oh, the M1s are supposed to be great. And then these color, she sees like, oh, look, it's like 6 months later and they're colored versions out now. And actually I would have preferred, it would have been nice, much better designs, lower, small bezels, beautiful looking. The Simpsons did a joke about this. Homer buys the computers, driving in the car and sees the billboard with the new computer that makes on the way home. Maybe that's the simplest way to describe it. We know this in the tech industry. We know that the thing we buy is going to be replaced by something better at some point in the future. But I just feel like you kind of look at why did they need to have the M1 even out in September? Like, why not wait until those designs were available? Or you could say, like, we're going to start with the Mini because we're not changing the Mini. Although, by the way, they should. That thing could be like half the size it is. It's weird, It's weird. people could probably come up with good examples of other things like this, not just Apple, right? Where some product comes out in November and then in June or July, whatever, that another one comes out and it's like, well, that's kind of weird, you know. But these are so high profile.
We did a great job of. Google had a big event yesterday. Microsoft had a little event. We're talking about Apple.
Well, look, from my perspective, the Microsoft thing is the biggest thing that happened yesterday.
Oh yeah.
Now, in the global perspective, that is absolutely untrue. And the Apple thing was just a side thing because I had the Apple. I've had this swirling around in my head. But yesterday, by the way, Android fan, Android user, you want to pay attention to what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
This is really big.
There's some good stuff there. Which, one small sidestep, they said they had 3 billion Android devices active.
Yeah, so you want to know what the thing is about that? And,
it makes Windows the third most popular OS on the planet now.
Well, it's always been.
Yeah, I guess so. You got Android, then you have iOS, and now Windows is like.
This doesn't shift the measurement that way, but if you go back and look, I'll just do this off the top of my head. 2019, they said at I/O that there were 2.5 billion Android devices, so 500,000 new devices out in the world, or more devices, I guess we'll call it, in 2 years. 2 years before that, in 2017, they said 2 billion, and that means that their growth rate, and this is not sales growth, right? Although there is sales growth. This is literally installed base growth. It's not market share, it's usage share, right? It's literally the number of devices out in the world, right? So there are more users using Android. There are more devices out in the world running Android. And yes, they are selling more Android devices too, like that's part of it. But that is really consistent growth for a product that is pretty pervasive out in the world. So I guess on the one hand, you might be like, well, that's kind of interesting. Why isn't it growing? But then why would it? How many more people are left? How are they able to grow at this same exact rate for what's that, 4 years, I guess, or whatever the period of time is? I don't know, but that's a big number. I mean, Apple, Apple's probably, it's over 1 billion. Probably well over 1 billion. I think the iPhone itself is probably 1 billion. Is that
something like that?
We know Windows is 1.3 billion, right? I would, these are all big platforms, right? They're all legit. But as I used to say in the past, when people wondered why developers weren't targeting Windows when they had so many users on Windows 10 or whatever, it comes down to this kind of engagement thing. And, we're all like this with our phones all day long. And I think most people can't wait to push away from Windows and go do something fun. Unfortunately, it's a work machine,
Android 12 looks pretty good too.
Yeah, so it looks so good. I put it on my Pixel 4a, which is not the device. That's the little one. From mid-year last year or August, and it kind of came up, and I was like, oh, I think I might want it. So I actually put it on the phone I use all the time. So what's not there is the best user-facing feature that they announced, or the most obvious, which is that automatic theming capability. So if you have like a background, it will pick up the accent colors and stuff. But I hope you like rounded rectangles, because they're here and they're coming to Windows too, obviously. It's pretty. It's I do a lot of this is another thing I've been meaning to kind of write about. I think about platforms and stuff. I think about this with music. I went through various stages. Apple announced their thing, and I'm like, maybe. And then it's like Amazon's like, we're dropping the price too, and we know Spotify's coming, and I'm like, what's Google doing? It's like I spent a lot of time like wondering if I should move around, And I look at the iPhone a lot, and I think about it. The iPhone I have is humongous and heavy, and when I pick it up compared to the Android phone I currently use, it feels like it's twice as heavy, and I'm always like, eh. But I like what they did with widgets in iOS 14. I like the stuff they're doing with privacy, frankly. I mean, I think that stuff is important. And so, you kind of find yourself drifting a little bit. And then they, Google announced this, and I'm like, no, I'm good. Like this, it looks nice. And by the way, for people who are questioning the value of what Microsoft's trying to do with Sun Valley, because it may just literally be a UI overhaul, that stuff's important, right?
It is.
It has a lot to do with your just daily satisfaction with using a thing, Microsoft can make it consistent with Windows, which is a lot trickier than what Google is doing with Android. That will be a huge success. See, but I really like what they are. I love the look of this new UI in Android. It's nice.
Yeah, they had a bunch of other announcements, but I think Android 12 kind of took it. They had a bunch of AI stuff. They talked a lot about quantum computing. They had a really kind of weirdish demo thing.
It started off like an Ignite thing. The event was a lot of high-minded AI machine learning stuff, and it was like, what are they? Come on, get to the. We want to see Android, but the map stuff I think was really big. The photo stuff was good, not huge like in previous years, but you like to see that moving along. To me, Android 12 is the biggest thing, but I mean, after that, it might be what they're doing with their wearables, right? They bought Fitbit. They're not using Fitbit OS going forward. They're combining Wear OS with Tizen in partnership with Samsung, which is fascinating to me. I have not used Android, what used to be called Android Wear, in a long time now, but I always felt like they actually had a really competent UI. I thought it made a lot more sense than the Apple Watch UI, which, if you remember, I know it's evolved, but in the beginning it was so completely different from anything else that Apple made. It was kind of hard to understand, and there were like bubbles that kind of moved around with the apps. It was just a weird UI, and I felt like Google's was more boring, but was more logical. Like it made sense immediately. Like it was more intuitive, if you will. But so we'll see. I'm obviously fascinated by what they might be doing there. But man, no mention at all of like, we're taking the best of Wear and the best of Fitbit and the best of Tizen, and we're making this thing. It's like, no, we're taking the best of Wear and the best of Tizen. And they mentioned Fitbit services, of course. They're going to want all the health stuff on there. But I guess we'll see. They literally no mention of Fitbit OS anywhere that I saw.
The good news is that if you want to learn some more about Stadia and how to build your game for that, there are 0 sessions at I/O related to Stadia.
Hey, some Google exec just told some video game magazine, Stadia is doing great, baby. Which, in Microsoft speak means they just cancel it internally. We haven't found out yet.
Yeah. Beating
I for whatever it's worth. I know it's weird, but Stadia works well.
The technology is fine. It's just the Google way, right? They're not in it for the long haul. They throw it out in there, and if it isn't an instant huge success, they're just kind of like, eh.
Yeah, you probably read the stuff around the time that they dropped their in-house studios, where there was a big conflict between the guys they had hired from the video game world to run the service, start the service, and the guys at Google who were like, come on, it's a Google product. Just put it out how it is and we'll fix it over time. And they're like, you don't do that. It has to be, and there was a big kind of conflict about how to go forward enough. And it's kind of interesting that one of the issues that may kill Stadia is because it's not googly enough,
Yeah.
It's like, what did you do? You ship something at work. That's not how we do this. It's strange. I don't know. It's a strange issue, but they just added a service box to Stadia, Brad. They're just moving ahead.
Moving on up or out or whatever.
Yeah. Just like us.
Hopefully.